Hi guys, pleasure to be here. I'd like to welcome Robby, Bozena and Saro here with me today. Thank you for joining. I think everybody would be super interested if you introduce yourselves and how you ended up in Web3 gaming. Saro, Alien Worlds is the largest NFT metaverse in history. How did you end up here?
Gosh, good question. We started life building DAOs, and we sort of had the insight at a certain point that was years ago, and we had the insight at that point that the technology was a bit too early for adoption kind of by businesses. And so we sort of decided that the best way to get widespread adoption quickly for DAO technology was within gaming. And so the combination of DAOs and NFTs, both of which are tokenizations of concepts, right? So NFTs tokenize objects and DAOs tokenize groups of people. Combining those within a single metaverse was the founding idea of Alien Worlds, and we were fortunate then to kind of galvanize a large community around us.
Awesome. And Bozena, what about GAMEE?
Hi, thank you. GAMEE is a mobile gaming company, and we have been creating games in mobile gaming industry for 8 years, and aim to see how we can connect people through play and build communities across the content, right? And over time, we built a large community of 40 million players, and we're always looking for what would be the next level for our community. What else can we do? How to upgrade it even? And that was about 3 years ago when we started looking into blockchain technology and possibly looking at the ownership of being the extra layer that could fuel the passion of the community. So we started looking into creating new products that would be with Web3 mindsets. And now we have 3 million monthly active gamers that are at various stages of onboarding into Web3. The journey is definitely long. Some of them have opened up first wallets with us. Some of them earned their first NFTs, and some of them already understand the concepts of DeFi. So that's a very exciting thing to see how through games you can showcase the value of technology and concepts of digital ownership, etc. So this is what we do as a company, and we're part of Animoca Brands family.
Awesome, which leads me on to Robby.
Hi. So from the Animoca Brands perspective, obviously we make a variety of different games through many of our different studios. And I think when it comes to DAOs specifically, we've invested in some, but also philosophically, we have a view that in the future, we think games will largely be run and governed by DAOs, because ultimately we think one of the contributions of Web3 to the game industry is the ability to transfer ownership of games themselves and the running of games to the communities that play them. So we believe very strongly in player-owned economies, and so the way we've set up many of our blockchain games is with a view towards transferring the governance and ownership of the games over to the community over time.
Awesome. So Saro, doing some research on you, I saw that before DAOs, you had pretty much coined the term DACs, or decentralized autonomous communities. What are the advantages of a community being decentralized over a centralized community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would go so far as to say that a centralized community is almost sort of a contradiction in terms, right? Because in a sense, if you have a centralized community, what you're really talking about is some kind of hierarchy that's owned by somebody. And that's almost anathema to the concept of a real community in which people actually feel like they have a stake in what they're part of, like they have a sense of responsibility for its success, for caring for it over time, and so on. So I think a true community involves some kind of shared sense of responsibility. And of course, we know that, as Robby says, comes through a shared sense of ownership, or at least a sense of ownership. So yes, back in the day, we were calling DAOs DACs. And I'm not sure we coined the term, but we were part of the founding communities that were using that term. And I mean, it's, I think, an interchangeable concept with DAO today. DAO was the term that was used more in the Ethereum communities. And so that's become the dominant term now. And so we've adopted it too. And our project is also in Ethereum. So I mean, a DAC or a DAO is, it's a tokenized group of people. And this is such a powerful concept, right? If we thought that being able to tokenize value, right, through cryptocurrency and the first generation, Bitcoin and so on was powerful. And if we then thought that being able to tokenize software, right, through smart contract applications that came after Bitcoin was powerful. Imagine being able to tokenize a group of people, right, organized around a token with an account, a blockchain account that's governed programmatically by smart contract according to prescribed rules in a way that's transparent and accountable and auditable. We can talk about all of the applications and the ways that this will get used, but I think that most of us who've been around in blockchain for a while understand that being able to represent something on chain instantly gives it a lot of value because it provides all of those qualities of transparency, immutability, et cetera. And when you can do that with a group of people, and what you're doing then is allowing them to self-organize and then to, for example, use a treasury in order to build over time value towards a sustained goal that they've decided together to work on. Super, super powerful. In fact, I would say that's probably the single most powerful implementation of blockchain technology since, just decentralization in the first place, right? And in our case, what we do in Alien Worlds is to conceive of those tokenized communities as game objects, right? So as actual components inside of the game, rather than as a way of organizing part of the supply of the token. So a lot of projects you'll hear that they're governed by a DAO, and what that means is that part of the token supply of that project is governed by a DAO. And that's also, a useful thing because it helps the community to be able to sort of give instructions or to be able to say what they want to do with part of the token supply. That's a very useful thing. But I think that it gets even more interesting, especially in a gaming context, when you have multiple DAOs connected tokenomically, in our case, by a single token that's then transferable for numerous tokens. So each DAO, in our case, has its own token, but you can only get that through the single fungible token of the entire metaverse, which is called Trillium. And those DAOs are competing with each other, right? So, I mean, what more natural thing within gaming than teams? And this is, of course, what a DAO is. It's a team. It's a group of people that's able to act in concert.
Awesome. Bozena, what is it like taking a gaming community that didn't necessarily have tokens or from a Web2 community into a Web3 community? What were the changes you saw when you did that?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. So I think there is a perspective of the community, and then there is a perspective of a game creator. And maybe starting from the community point of view, is that we always had, and many games always had, very passionate communities that care deeply about the content. So they always desired to be able to influence the roadmap, be part of the decision making, be heard, and their feedback implemented. And it was always there. So if you want, the market need was always around with games. So when there is a possibility and a tool to give it more power, that's super welcome. So we are by far from the sophistication Alien Worlds are, as our role within the onboarding is at the very beginning. So in our case, the gamers, they start experimenting with owning part of the gaming currency and then voting and making decisions, but they're super, super excited to be able to do that. They absolutely love it. And you see the power of, like, it's not empty words. Like you can see that when you make that real, you are very much rewarded from the community by giving them this option. Now, from the game creator perspective, if you look as far as Alien Worlds and you explain this concept to a game creator that has been creating games without decentralization in mind, it's scary. It's something that it's very hard to imagine because it requires a change in mindset. You simply have to think about the game very, very differently. And that, I think, will remain a bit challenging for game creators coming from Web 2 into Web 3. So that I see is more like a gradual process, is over time giving up parts of the decision making and handing it over to the community rather than doing a big leap, because that is scary. And frankly, there are so many ways that this requires change in mindset and also thinking differently about genres, economies, that I don't think there is like a clear cookbook people would follow to say, okay, this is the way how to do it. It's still very experimental. So for me, on the game creator side, that's a gradual process, and it's the same with us, right? We start step by step, we see the response, and we continue.
Awesome. Robby, one of the adages I hear a lot is that in Web 2, you build the product and then the community will come. But in Web 3, the community comes first. Wearing your hat as an investor into this space, do you agree with this statement? And what do you look for specifically from communities when you look at different gaming companies to make an investment in?
So I think your point is correct, although I would say that community and product end up getting built hand in hand in this case, because one of the things that happens is when we start to tokenize in-game assets, we have the ability to then, of course, offer ownership of those digital assets separate from the game experience itself. And so it enables game developers to rethink the process of what it means to, quote unquote, manufacture a product, because you can start to build, because a game is ultimately a story, right? And an activity. And you can start to build a story around things like collectible characters or trading cards or posters or things like that that help to get people inspired by a story and also serve as a marketing campaign for the ultimate product that you're creating. And I think we've seen great examples of that throughout, Web3 games. And as you sort of build that drip feed of content over time, you also build community. You keep reinforcing community. You tease things. You offer small things for them to purchase or give them for free as airdrops, etc. And so you're going sort of hand in glove in building community alongside with the content. And I think that if you're not doing that, I think if you're approaching it from a traditional development standpoint of, I'm going to make the product and then launch the product and then we'll put lots of users into it, or we'll try to build lots of users in the absence entirely of product, then you're kind of missing a trick because you don't understand all the tools that are available to you.
Awesome. So
I would perhaps just sort of amplify part of that, which is that one of the amazing things in decentralized communities is that the community often starts using something in a way that you didn't actually, that the original designers didn't necessarily completely expect. And that, so for example, in our case, we're a play-to-earn game where people earn the token, but also NFTs. Well, our community just began creating competitions and these sort of competitive meme-based. They had a volcano where you had to throw some of the NFTs into the volcano, and then that got burned. And that was a really interesting example because the NFTs that they were encouraging to be burned were extremely abundant. In fact, they were overabundant. And so the community was sort of self-regulating and in balance within the game. And then we observed that. And we also then thought, okay, well, we better try and design some slightly better scaled and more technical ways of actually kind of creating that within part of our functionality. So in these decentralized gaming metaverse communities, the original designers and developers are not the only ones creating functionality. And so that's why product and community have to go alongside each other, because there's numerous components within the community that are actually developing the product.
Yeah. And I would also say that what Bozena said earlier about it's a process and a road to doing this, I think is absolutely true because, like Sarah's example just now, people started creating new functionality, but that was only certain people in the community who decided to take it upon themselves to demonstrate leadership. Lots of people just show up because they want to play. And so I think you need to have it as a process. If you're thinking about, handing over the reins of the product to a DAO, you need to establish roles and you need to establish community, and people need to take it upon themselves to want to be leaders before you can just sort of open the floodgates and be like, here you go, it's up to you now, because otherwise you'll just get chaos then.
Bozena, you've struck deals with many famous brands and IPs, including NASA and Manchester City Football Club. How do you go about merging existing brands into your existing ecosystem? And how do you foster the sort of different communities within that?
It was always within our intentions to find ways how we can connect communities, right? Looking at our own community and various others that have passion about space or sport or and other types of video games. It's just figuring out how can you build a bridge that's fun, because we're still talking entertainment, that people would take whatever they're interested in, or even something they own, and they would use it on our platform. So I give you a couple of examples how this was done. So with the global big brands such as NASA or Manchester's Football City Club, we have created a game within our gaming platform Arcade, and we invited their fans to play. So that was for them. It was their oftentimes first Web3 experience, where they would open a wallet easily, they would earn first token and play the game, earn first NFT. In some other cases, it got more sophisticated as we were looking into communities that already understood Web3. So next, in 2 days, actually, there is a collaboration with Cool Cats launching. In this case, it's an existing community of holders of NFTs of cats, and for these holders, based on ownership of this token, they get access to a game and a contest within our platform. So this way, as a proof of ownership, gets you access to something extra on the platform. This is another way how you can connect, invite communities and see what they do. There are many, many different other ways what can be done. We have tested so far maybe 10 different approaches with multiple different partners, and the exciting part is that there is so many other ways you can test, because our platform supports multiple tokens. We can decide whichever NFT collection has different utility, and that's exactly the idea, right? It's not to create something and keep within our walled gardens or within our ecosystem, but to see how the assets can actually be used across. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, it doesn't have to go deep in the game design. It can be small, different experiments and see how people respond, if they like it, if they would like to do that again, and how.
Robby, do you have anything to add on that, given the Animoca ecosystem?
I think most importantly is when you're trying to put together those partnerships is to think about them, again, going back to this idea of building community, to think about how you're going to authentically build something that serves the interests of the community. I think one of the things that Web3 is quite good at, the Web3 community generally, is smelling inauthenticity, and you will feel a lot of backlash quickly for inauthenticity. So I think it's important. I mean, the beauty of this constant feedback mechanism is that you do have the ability to do A/B testing in real time with the community. And they will tell you what they like and what they don't like, and some of which you listen to and some of which you don't listen to, like all feedback. And so I think it's to be thoughtful to and faithful to the brand, and that's actually the trickiest bit.
So the traditional gaming model would often normally revolve around power users that would make up a large majority of a certain game's revenue. Within a DAO-style structure, is that still the case, or are the economics far more equal? Sarah?
So because DAOs are essentially on-chain accounts that have a treasury that are collectively managed by token holders programmatically, and the A in DAO is autonomous. So, especially eventually in a DAO's sort of maturation, it should be fully autonomous, which means, in fact, that it would be able to amend its own code. Because of that, it's extremely important that there's stake-weighted voting. So what that means is that one token, one vote. So whereas so DAOs are not democratic, actually, interestingly. I think they're very fair, especially from a blockchain perspective, because one token is one vote, and every single token has the same amount of rights and privileges within a system. But it's not one account, one vote. Recalling, of course, that within blockchain structures, whenever you have anything that's ascribed to an account, then you get the opportunity for what's called Sybil attacks, which is where you can create numerous accounts and sort of game and spam the system that way. So DAOs need to be secured through stake-weighted voting. And what that means then is that what you ultimately want is for the amount of stake into the DAO to exceed the value of the treasury, because otherwise the DAO is a ripe takeover target. You get a sort of understaked, overcapitalized DAO that is then ripe for takeover, which in our case, because the DAOs are in-game components, is actually part of the fun of it, because communities are vying with each other to see who could take over another, right? And so they're sort of vying to become more prosperous so that then one could take over the other. But outside of a gaming context, you wouldn't want a sort of understaked, overcapitalized DAO. So, you know, it's important that the community is staking and is voting and is engaged. One of the issues that's happened historically with DAOs within crypto is that we've had extremely large treasuries being managed by very few voters. And you can end up with one of two things: either sort of stasis and stalemate, where it's impossible to get consensus enough to be able to make transactions out of the treasury, or the opposite, which is where the treasury gets drained extremely quickly to kind of to the largest whale. So this is part, I think, of that sort of one of the themes I think has come through a lot. Bozena and Robby have both sort of talked about this, is the experimental A/B nature of this community product cycle that we're in through Web3 decentralized communities, right? Where there's an iterative way in which that's developing. And so some of the sort of failures that DAOs have sort of seen in the past are, I think, part of the maturation of those DAOs. And in fact, interestingly, a lot of the time they can self-regulate again, right? So if a DAO sort of goes off the rail, as long as the entire treasury hasn't yet been drained. So for example, in our case, our DAOs perpetually are refilled, the treasuries are refilled through the play turn mechanic. And we've done that very intentionally so that if in a given governance period, the DAO sort of goes off the rails, there are future iterative cycles during which the community can then say, hang on, we need to get more engaged, the community can galvanize, can vote, and can then lead it forward in a different way. So yeah, it's super important that everyone's voting and participating in DAOs, but this is a sort of ongoing process of the community realizing the power that it has and learning how to exert it properly.
Thanks. I'm also keen to get everybody's sort of opinion really on the difference in communities and the importance on the game itself of the underlying blockchain that the game is actually based on in the first place. Perhaps starting with Robby.
Sure. I think this goes back to the community question. So I think the underlying blockchain technology is important, but not as important as thinking about, I mean, there are technical considerations and then there are community considerations. Yeah. And I think one thing that you'll find is that different chains also have different types of communities who are participating in the applications and things that are already available on those chains. And so one of the things that we try to do is to be sensitive to what is that existing community, because maybe your Polygon community and Immutable community and Wax community, et cetera, are all different types of people with different interests or different geographic territories. And how does that fit in with the content that we're looking to put out? And also, how can we be inclusive? So we're making a big effort now with many of our newer products to see how we can include communities from multiple chains, or ownership on multiple chains at least, in a single game experience, because we want to try to bring people together as much as possible.
Yeah, I would say that the sort of importance of the chain is something that we're still dealing with, because the technology is not yet as interoperable as it will hopefully be in the not too distant future. It might be a good moment to mention OMA3, the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3, in which a group of companies and metaverse projects, including Animoca Brands and us, have come together to try and create interoperability between metaverses, essentially between blockchain platforms, right? So yeah, like bottom line, right now, the choice of chain technology does make a bit of a difference, especially because then that kind of keeps you more within that world of chains that are interoperable with the one that you're on. But we hope that in the not too distant future, there will be more bridges and more mapping technology that allows NFTs at least to be ported over identities and really to realize this vision of the open metaverse.
In our case, I think it's a little bit different because most of our users, when they first join Arcade and start playing with GBoss, they are not part of any chain community yet. So it's through Arcade and through GBoss, they're becoming part of the chain community, maybe sometimes even without knowing, because that's part of the onboarding, is that you cannot and should not make the technology too visible, because that will become a barrier in their user experience, right? So until the moment they need to know, when is the moment when they take their digital assets and they take it to an external wallet, that is the moment where they need to know, and they do know. And the ideal case scenario is that by us making a choice about a chain, we do not lock them with one wallet, right? So the more interoperable we can become, the better. But as been said, it's not that easy as it sounds. So for us, the idea is we guide them people until the moment when they understand, okay, I have these assets on Arcade, on Polygon, but it would be great if this does not have to be the only case, right? For us as a company, there was a choice we've made looking for a chain that's fast and not expensive to make transactions on, because Arcade is high engagement, millions of gameplays every month. So that was naturally one of the options. But it would be sad to say that this is the only option, right? The more choices and the more interoperable, that would give us opportunities to partner with communities outside of the chain as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm afraid our time is up, but I feel like we could keep going for another hour or two. But Bozena, Sarah, Robby, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.